Happy Friday, folks. Senior Editor Mackenzie DeLulo here, and welcome back to the Texans' weekly Roundup podcast. This week, the team discusses the Texas Senate adopting rules for Ken Paxton's Senate impeachment trial, former Texas Congressman Will Hurd running for the 2024 presidential GOP nomination, the Texas GOP condemning the impeachment of Paxton, the Senate passing a new $12.7 billion property tax relief plan in the midst of its standoff with the Texas House, federal judges hearing arguments over removed books in a Texas public library, Democrats vying to replace Cruz challenger Representative Colin Allred, Palestine's mayoral candidates defending themselves from accusations of wrongdoing and criminal histories, Governor Greg Abbott breaking his personal veto record with 76 vetoes for the 88th regular session, the Texas Education Agency's proposals to update its school district rating system, Abbott signing a law to increase Texans' online user data protections, and TCU teaching an elective course on drag performances. As always, if you have questions for our team, DM us on Twitter or email us at editor@thetexan.news. We'd love to answer your questions on a future podcast. Thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Well, howdy, folks. Mackenzie here with Brad, with Cameron, with Hayden, with Matt. I'm starting right off with Brad's news that he just shared with us, which I'm thrilled about. I cannot believe you agreed for me to mention this on the podcast. I will say me asking you, I think, was a very nice thing. So I'm going to pat myself on the back because I could have just done it without your consent.
You would have done it anyway.
Yeah. But I asked.
So this is such a low bar.
No, I asked.
A keyboard elf could clear it with one step. That's how low a bar we're talking.
And I just feel like I should pat myself on the back for my kindness I've extended to you today.
Oh, okay.
Tell us what you just told us. I understand that sentence was weird. Tell our listeners what you just told us.
I said that the topic of Cornwallis, Charles Cornwallis from the Revolutionary War came up, and said that in 5th grade, I went to school dressed as Charles Cornwallis for the Revolutionary War Day.
It's just too good.
Why is it too
good? Because of all, it's just so good. You didn't dress up as George Washington. You dressed up as...
Listen, I have this thing where I cannot jump on a bandwagon. And so, for example, my favorite Detroit Tigers player has never been Miguel Cabrera because I can't stand jumping on the best player's bandwagon. And so the same rule applies here.
So you had that clarity, that wherewithal of your own identity as a 5th grader?
I don't think I realized it at that point.
Okay.
I realized that after the fact.
Got it. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah. So
I will say it also came up because Hayden just out of the blue said, I'm glad my name's not Cornwallis. Which was also,
I feel very blessed.
Which was also just a gem of a thing to say. Blessed us today.
What was that even in reference to?
It's in the docket for our podcast. Oh. Somebody's last name is Cornwallis. I didn't read the whole thing.
Oh. It's a candidate that Matt will talk about later. Well, shout out to that candidate. I think the last name Cornwallis is awesome.
I apologize to all Cornwallises. I did not mean to.
Cornwalli. I think I have a good last name, so
Sparks
I want to keep it.
Such a good last name. It really is. Okay,
you have to be a young adult novel writer now.
I do.
That's your.
I understand that reference.
Thank you.
I never did read a Nicholas Sparks book, but I understand the reference.
He is well known in the genre. Genre, that's not the right word. What word am I looking for?
The genre. That's music. I don't know. I guess it kind of... All I can think of is canon for a literary term. Anyway. Okay, well, Hayden Sparks with the phenomenal last name Sparks. We're going to start with you. Huge news. After 2 days, the Texas Senate finally adopted rules that will govern the impeachment trial of suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton. What immediately stood out to you about these rules?
After 2 days, the Texas Senate deliberated and approved rules for suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton's trial by a vote of 25-3. The 3 no votes were Senator Paxton, Senator Sarah Eckhart, and Senator Bob Hall. And there were a few things that stood out to me about the rules at first blush. First, the burden of proof will be on the House of Managers, and it will be a beyond a reasonable doubt standard, which is notable because this is not a criminal trial. This is not a civil trial. This is a political proceeding, and they are setting a very high bar for proving that Mr. Paxton committed the offenses that are laid out in the 20 charges. They could have chosen clear and convincing evidence, preponderance of the evidence, probable cause, any other type of evidentiary standard, but they set this high bar that the House managers will be required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Paxton is guilty. Also, charges can be dismissed summarily by a majority vote, and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick cannot make a decision unilaterally on that. He must submit it to the chamber, which is called the Court of Impeachment in the resolution. For simplicity's sake, I'll call it the Senate because this is a political proceeding, and while there's a lot of courtroom lingo and judicial terminology being used, this is not a judicial proceeding. It is a political trial. The Court of Impeachment, or the Senate, will have the ability to throw out a charge by a majority vote, and then they would not proceed to trial on it. There will be live witness testimony at the trial. This is a denial of a request by Mr. Paxton's legal team that testimony be presented by deposition. Witnesses will be able to be subpoenaed by the parties. In other words, they cannot choose not to testify. They are required to testify if the Senate orders them to do so, and if they disobey, they will be held in contempt of the legislature. Most notably, however, Senator Paxton will not be able to vote on the articles of impeachment, which will be either sustained or not sustained at the end of the trial by the Senate. If the articles of impeachment are sustained, Mr. Paxton will then be considered convicted, and a separate vote will be held whether to permanently bar him from running for office in the future. But if he's convicted, he is automatically permanently removed from the office, and his wife, Senator Paxton, will not have a say in that decision. However, she will be counted for the purpose of determining the vote threshold for the number of votes required to convict Mr. Paxton, which is a 2/3 vote. If she is absent from the vote, then it lowers the number of votes required for conviction. Her presence will keep that vote threshold at 21 votes, but she will not get to have a say in the decision. So they, in essence, decided this dilemma for her. And we talked about this before, of her either being there and participating and possibly being a conflict of interest, or not representing her constituents and making it easier for her husband to be convicted. And the Senate has resolved both of those things with these rules.
So what are some of the other highlights of the rules that will guide this very historic? And it was surreal watching the Senate lay this out last night. It was very surreal watching Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick talk about it public. We just have heard so little from the Senate on this, as many senators have come forward and said, we will not be making, they've issued statements saying they won't issue a statement, right? And viewing this as a trial. And so hearing it actually happen, and even just the impeachment of a statewide official, is, just like you said, historic. All that to say, what are some other highlights of the rules that will guide the proceeding?
Well, I will say this. In these podcast segments, we present this often as a news broadcast, but this is a little bit more informal. So I will say that when I make some of these observations, I do not care whether Ken Paxton is convicted or acquitted. I have no stake in this, and I'll get the same number of hours of sleep whether he's found not guilty or guilty on any of these charges. But I will say that this process, if the Senate follows these rules, will be considerably more thorough, and there will be considerably more due process than there was on the House side of things. They are able to suspend these rules by a 2/3 vote. So the Senate is known for suspending its own rules. I doubt that the Senate will do that in this case, because they need to promote the legitimacy of this trial because of the questions about the way the House impeached Paxton in the 2-day time frame that it did. But members will not be allowed to use their cell phones during the trial. They are Under a gag order, they cannot discuss this trial publicly with people, especially not the parties involved. They cannot comment on social media about their opinion about what's going on. There's a schedule for pretrial motions, and Lieutenant Governor Patrick makes most of the decisions. He will decide on pretrial motions. He will decide on incidental motions, and he can hire legal counsel. And the members of the Court of Impeachment, i.e. senators, can hire legal counsel, but those people cannot be lobbyists for obvious reasons. There will be time limits in place for the presentation of evidence. A total of 24 hours is granted. There will be time allotted for rebuttal witnesses, opening statements, closing arguments, and cross-examination. Several of the articles of impeachment dealing with the securities fraud charges will be held in abeyance until the end of the trial. I'm not quite sure why this is, but my gut says that they don't want to interfere with the criminal prosecution. So if I had to guess, make an educated forecast, they are probably trying not to interfere with the criminal prosecution against Mr. Paxton if they don't have to. Interesting note, it requires that motions be printed in 12 Times New Roman font. So they are...
Which I can appreciate. I can appreciate that
too.
Yes.
They are really planning out every detail of this trial.
It was 29 pages long, these rules were.
Yes, 29 pages and 31 rules. For 31 senators, I suppose.
Yeah, that does seem very poetic.
It does.
So the lieutenant governor did make a statement following the adoption of the rules and the votes. What was his sentiment regarding the process that he had just gone through for, 48 hours, whatever it was? You know better than I do, but you were there 9:30 the night before. You were there the whole time. So, but what was the lieutenant governor's sentiment?
Well, thank you for giving me a little bit of extra time to talk about this, because it was interesting that they kept taking a recess. They obviously thought that they were going to finish this up sooner, but they kept needing to give themselves additional time because of all the issues they needed to hash over. Patrick seemed pleased with the results of these negotiations. He said, quote, "I've never been more proud of the members of this floor and how you came together on this set of rules and how seriously you're taking your responsibility. I'm proud of all of you, and the citizens of Texas can count on the Senate of Texas to have a fair and just trial." Senator Birdwell led the charge on the impeachment rules, and Patrick thanked him and all the senators for their work on these rules. It seems the Senate is seeking to portray to the public that they are taking this seriously and that they intend to be an impartial court of impeachment.
And to be fair as well in the rules, and I may botch this, so correct me where I'm wrong, because undoubtedly I will be. But there was a provision in the rules as well where the lieutenant governor can appoint somebody else as, president of the trial or something along those lines, which it sounds like would be a senator. I think it explicitly states it's a senator who would not be up for election in 2024, meaning that the aim there is to potentially relieve some of the political pressure that could be placed on somebody presiding over such a trial, right? Like this person would run for re-election in 2026.
That's correct. Patrick is presumed to be the presiding officer over the trial, but it says, quote, "In addition, the president of the Senate may appoint a jurist who shall not run for election in the 2024 election cycle to serve as the presiding officer of the court." So interpreted narrowly, that seems to mean re-election for Senate, but interpreted broadly, who shall not run for election.
Yeah, it doesn't say Senate, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So if a senator had plans to run for something in 2024, they would not be permitted to serve as a presiding officer. So you are correct about that. There is a provision of these rules that take care of that.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to hop in?
Yes. The word is jurist, correct, Hayden?
It says jurist, and that did throw me a little bit. It doesn't say member.
He's not saying juror. He's not saying juror. He's saying jurist. So my initial reading of that, or my impression, was that he may appoint somebody who is a judge of the state to preside over the Senate, not one of the members who are jurors. But the plain reading of that word, I understand it to mean he can appoint a judge to serve, just like in the U.S. Congress under an impeachment trial, the chief judge of the U.S. Supreme Court presides. over it. So that was my interpretation of that rule, where it was giving Patrick the latitude to allow it to serve similar to a U.S. impeachment.
Yeah, that's interesting that it might even be meant to mirror the federal protocol there. Yeah, Matt, that's an interesting point.
So that is correct. There may be room for interpretation there. So perhaps the senator may or may not be able to run for re-election. That may be something that needs to be explained further, because it says the president of the Senate or a member of the Senate designated by the president serves as the presiding officer of the court. In addition, the president of the Senate may appoint a jurist who shall not run for election in the 2024 election cycle to serve as the presiding officer of the court. So there is some ambiguity. At first blush, it sounds like it applies to the senators, but it may not.
It also just might be our bias or inference that's coming into play there of
right.
Like watching Senator Birdwell lay out the rules or whatever it is. Because Senator Birdwell, I looked it up. He's not up for re-election in 2024. It's 2026. So it may just be the context clues making us think those things. But jurist is a very specific word. Hayden, thank you. I would encourage folks to go read Hayden's article at the Texan. Gives all the details. The rules are embedded in the article, so you can read the rules, all 29 pages if you so choose. But we'll continue to keep an eye on this. There will be a lot to come. Brad, we're going to come to you. The Texas Senate made another move this week in the property tax fight between the two chambers. This is the other big story of the Senate this week. What'd they do?
The Texas Senate revamped its plan for providing property tax relief this week. The new version amounts to $12.7 billion total. That's about $400 million more than the previous plan. It includes about $7.4 billion for new school district rate compression, $5.3 billion to raise the homestead exemption to $100,000, raises the franchise tax exception from $1 million to $2.47 million. So any business that brings in less money than $1 million currently doesn't have to pay franchise tax, and this would raise that bar to about $2.5 million. It also notably reduces the school district voter approval rate from 2.5% to 1.75%. That was something that I'd missed originally, trying to figure out the appropriations for compression and homestead exemption that we've been fighting over for weeks now. But that is a pretty notable addition to this bill. In 2019, the legislature reduced the voter approval rate for school districts from 8% down to 2.5%. And that was one of the big reforms in recent memory that the legislature has done on property taxes. This would reduce it even further. Betancourt said at a press conference after the Senate passed this bill, this is simply the best tax package that we've produced. When you have this type of agreement from your Senate colleagues, I think it speaks volumes. Patrick added that the Senate is not going to give up its homestead exemption. Obviously, they haven't done that yet. They haven't given in and accepted the House's plan that it passed on the first day of this special session that is all rate compression. And still, they insist they will not do that. Notably, Patrick at the press conference called this the largest property tax cut in the history of the world, which was
quite the statement.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say it's not accurate. Now, when they're calculating all these numbers, like the Senate has said that this is an $18 billion property tax cut. That includes the $5.3 billion that was itemized in the budget to continue compression that was passed in 2019. So it's kind of stacking pre-existing relief on top of new relief. So, but overall, the line item for it would be $18 billion, including that segment in the budget. So, not really sure. It seems like the House has very little intention of passing this, first and foremost because they are not back in Austin, at least as of yet. There seems to be no indication that they're going to come back to Austin during the special session, so we'll see what they do.
How'd the governor respond?
So the governor has been a spokeswoman for the governor said the governor has been clear that his goal is to put Texans on a pathway to eliminate their school maintenance and operations property taxes, and the best way to do that is to devote all property tax relief to cutting property taxes. She added that the two chambers need to work together to get something to his desk. That's consistent with the governor's message this whole time. He prefers the all rate compression plan because he saw it as a compromise between the two chambers' positions during the regular session. And now this is what he has chosen to go forward with. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of the new Senate plan, this statement, but with now only a few days remaining in the special session, who knows if this will be enough to get the House to come back. Looking like not, but, stranger things have happened.
Really quickly, let us know the news regarding Speaker Phelan and property taxes this week.
The Speaker announced the creation of a House Select Study Committee on Sustainable Property Tax Relief. It will be tasked with evaluating the various strategies of property tax relief and the sustainability of eliminating maintenance and operation taxes in 12 years. It is chaired by Representative Morgan Meyer, who has carried all of the House's property tax bills, and then vice chaired by Democrat Rep. Sean Thierry. It also includes 3 public members, Galveston County Tax Assessor Collector Cheryl Johnson, former executive at the TDCJ, Brad Livingston, and restaurateur Skeeter Miller, who owns County Line Barbecue franchise. So I'm not really sure what the timeline is for this, whatever the study results to come out, but this is something the House is now working on.
Thank you, Brad. Hayden, coming back to you on Paxton. Let's talk about some reactions we've seen on the whole proceeding. A statewide executive board for the Republican Party of Texas had some choice words for Paxton's impeachment. What was the result of its vote?
The Republican Party of Texas State Republican Executive Committee voted to condemn the impeachment of Ken Paxton by 53-11, much different than the House vote to impeach, which was 121-23, with only one more Democrat voting for impeachment than Republicans. So while there was mostly Republican support in the House for impeachment, this political board overwhelmingly voted to condemn the impeachment, doing so primarily on procedural grounds, concluding that the process was not conducive to Mr. Paxton's right to be Attorney General and not have that interrupted through a rushed process, more or less. That was poorly worded, but I think everybody gets the idea. They were determining that the people elected him to office and that the result of that election should not be reversed based on the evidence that was presented to the House. And notably, they wanted to see the charges summarily dismissed instead of to proceed to trial, as other local parties had urged. And that drew the ire of at least one Republican member. Justin Holland said that nobody in real Texas politics cares about the SREC or its chair. That was his exact quote. So quite a conflict between supporters of impeachment and opponents here.
Absolutely. Does this have any significance for the trial at all?
No, they have no role in the trial. The SREC does not get to make any kind of decision. This vote has no official effect. The target audience here is Republican primary voters, which are, frankly, the most important part of Texas politics because of the way the state leans politically. And at this point, the most recent poll said about half of registered voters feel the impeachment was justified. I don't know the exact figure for Republican primary voters. I don't want to speculate. I have a number in my brain, but I don't know for sure if it's correct, so I won't say it. But about half of registered voters said that they believe the impeachment was justified. So clearly the SREC does not speak for the entire public or the entire voting public, but it is a data point for how this will probably be handled during the election cycle, which is every member who voted for impeachment is going to be hounded about it by the party.
Absolutely. And if I were to break it down in words that may or may not make sense to most people, I'd say that the Republican primary block of voters You have those who are incredibly involved at the local level, who are part of their local Republican club, who attend the state convention every 2 years, who serve as delegates, who know who their state rep is potentially personally. Those are thousands of Texans, tens of thousands of Texans who are involved at that kind of level. But you also have Republican primary voters who are very loyal Republicans who are not involved in these kinds of party processes that the SREC is the head of, right? So you have these two different kinds of Republican primary voters who are potentially being polled in a poll like that. And we always talk about polls. They're very interesting. They can indicate data points, but they're not Bible, right? They give us interesting information, but there's a margin of error. You're still only polling maybe a few thousand people at most, typically. And it just kind of gives us a little bit of insight potentially and is not gospel. So who knows?
This may be skewed. This may be anecdotal just based on my involvement in politics over the years. But when I think of SREC and RPT and like local parties, I think of your teenage Republican clubs, your college Republican clubs, your retirees who have the time to, dedicate all this
volunteering
campaigns.
Yeah.
And then when you think of like broadly Republican primary voters, I picture, your average guy in khaki pants and a polo, like at work, who he might be, not necessarily tuned in to everything going on at the party level, but he votes in Republican primaries. And that's obviously a totally subjective, anecdotal way of looking at it, but that's probably a little bit of the difference we're looking at here.
I think there's like an average that can be like pointed to with that analogy pretty easily. Hayden, thank you for your coverage. Cameron, we're coming to you. We have not forgotten about you.
I'm still here.
Yay. And Matt, we'll come after this. Llano County has been at the center of increasing scrutiny over library book access. We've written about this quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about how we got to this lawsuit reaching a federal judge.
Yeah, so the challenge began in April 2021 after 7 citizens of Llano County challenged the county commissioner's court for removing books that were deemed sexually explicit from the county library, and they actually ended the access to them through the online ebook and audiobook system. And so the lawsuit first went through a U.S. District Court here in Austin, Texas, where a judge issued an order that the removed books must be returned and made accessible. After that order of the returning of the books to the library shelves, the county commissioner's court considered whether or not to pull funding and actually close the library altogether. They ultimately decided to keep the library open, but the lawsuit remained open. So the lawsuit was taken up in a court in New Orleans where 3 judges examined the arguments from both sides in this affair.
Yeah. So where does the lawsuit currently stand?
So, like I said, attorneys from both sides got a chance to present their arguments for the case, and with a lot of the focus of the arguments being on how the librarians conduct their weeding process, which means how they are looking through and determining if books should be placed on the shelves or not. And it all came back a lot to the motivations of the individuals who are in charge of that weeding process. And so no decision was made at the conclusion of the presentation during those proceedings, but a issue on that order could be coming in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Cameron, thanks for your coverage. Matthew, we're coming to you. The Democratic primary for Colin Allred's congressional seat has already seen a crowded field of contenders. Give us some of the details on who is running.
With incumbent U.S. Representative Colin Allred leaving his Dallas area congressional seat after announcing his bid for the Democratic nomination to challenge incumbent U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, the Republican, one of the 2 Republicans for the state of Texas, 7 candidates have emerged to run for Allred's open congressional seat. State Representative Julie Johnson, a Democrat state representative from the Carrollton area, is the latest and most notable candidate to announce for the district, being the only member of the Texas legislature to join the congressional race for Texas' 32nd congressional district. Johnson joins 6 other Democrats, including Sandeep Srivastava, Dr. Brian Williams, Alex Cornwallis, Jan McDowell, Zach Manning, and Justin Moore. We highlight how several of these candidates have previously run for elected office, including making prior congressional runs as well as their professional backgrounds in the story. Johnson's congressional bid also creates an opportunity for her state House seat in House District 115. Both her seat and the congressional district are considered Democrat strongholds. However, the House District 115 seat was held by Republican Matt Rinaldi prior to Johnson's successful challenge to him in 2018. Now, with candidates announcing their campaigns presently for these different positions, filing for the actual positions on the ballot will run starting mid-November through December 11th of this year for the March 2024 primary elections. So we'll keep an eye out to see who else joins the bid for these state and congressional district races.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Matt, for your coverage. It's going to be fascinating and a huge race, as it is I always picture these races where somebody leaves their spot to run for higher office, a prominent higher office, is like the daughter of that race. I don't know why I think of it that way. Great. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much. I appreciate your coverage, and Brad glaring at me after I made that sentiment just totally threw me off. Yeah. Oh, well, that helps. That actually does make me feel better.
Trying to backtrack and figure out what you were saying. So I could respond,
that actually makes me feel better than you sitting over there thinking I'm stupid, which might still happen, but I appreciate that more.
Have you seen my whiteboard?
That's so true. Hayden, coming to you, politics in East Texas are starting to sound literally like an episode of Ozark. I can't say anything after Brad glared at me for 6 seconds. Tell us about the latest in this race for mayor of Palestine.
I thought you were hesitating because you didn't want to say that. And I thought, did she read it before I wrote it? Oh my gosh. This is really rough. This podcast.
We're doing a really great job today.
Yeah. I stayed up too late reading rules.
Yeah. Hayden submitted a draft at 1:30 a.m. last night.
There is a runoff underway in Palestine for mayor after no candidate received a majority in the May 6th general election. And a lot has been going on in this contest. One of the issues we've covered in this election was a criminal charge from 2005 against one of the candidates, Chrissy Clark, who was accused of stealing her teenage daughter's identity in 2005, and that criminal charge was later dismissed. But it became an issue again over the weekend after her daughter, who was said to be the victim in the 2005 indictment, posted a long post angry about people who continue to bring this up. She said, quote, "My mother may not be perfect, but she's also not the monster you all are making her out to be. She is not a racist. She didn't murder any ex-husband and very much has a relationship with all of her children. This group has been ripping her to shreds and dragging my family into this mess, and nobody deserves that. If you feel so much superior, then why didn't you run for mayor? You practice love thy neighbor, but are a bunch of keyboard warriors," end quote. And that was only part of the remarks that she made in the social media post, which was addressed to people who are commenting on the 2005 criminal charge and other things that we didn't print because they aren't verified. And the criminal charge is not gossip. Other things about it may be, but we have all the documentation about how she was charged and the circumstances under which the charge was dismissed, and all of that's available at the Texan.news.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the issues that were discussed at the candidate forum that you also covered? The
candidate forum was probably almost seems like a footnote in this election at this point, but there are real issues that are being hashed over in this race, and there were disagreements between Clark and her opponent, Mitchell Jordan, on what kind of economic development to prioritize in the city of Palestine. They talked about the merit of having something like a Schlitterbahn water park. Jordan thinks that will attract people, tourists, and that will boost the economic vitality of Palestine. Whereas Clark said there needs to be more industry and things like manufacturing. She said the city's airport is a huge asset because it facilitates jet travel, which is conducive to business. and she believes that something like a water park is seasonal and would not provide the types of jobs that Palestine needs to grow. But a lot of this policy discussion has been overshadowed by some of the other things going on in this race. Both candidates have criminal charges in their past, but Jordan gave us a lengthy statement about his criminal charge. He was convicted of a misdemeanor in his late teens and said that God used it to change his life. The DA and the judge had him go to school and do community service, and he said it was a great experience for him, and he believes that set him on a better path in life. And it was, of course, in his late teens. And Clark provided us a lengthy statement about her criminal charge, and we asked point blank if her daughter's comments should be taken to mean that she was falsely accused back in 2005, and if the charge was dismissed on procedural grounds. And that was not answered directly, but she said that, and I'll read the tail end of her statement here. She said, quote, "They are throwing it all at the wall here at the final stretch. Treating a 17-year-old dismissal as a conviction or a deferral is a diabolical misdirection. Some of these Facebook groups have become cheap, unedited tabloids written by anonymous authors on Facebook. It is so ludicrous that local Palestine news outlets refuse to give it any air. It's a dismissal. The case is closed," end quote. So a very assertive response to those continuing to ask questions about this 2005 indictment. But there's so much more to this story, and I would encourage all of our readers to go to the Texan.news and check out our coverage on Palestine's elections.
Yeah, no kidding, folks. This is quite the saga. I know a listener, a frequent listener of our podcast, responded to our tweet this week with a link to how to write a screenplay for Netflix, which made us laugh pretty hard. So shout out Joe Hootman. Okay. Hey, listeners, if you're enjoying our podcast, subscribe to the Texan right now while you're listening. We're not funded by corporate interest or big donors, so we rely on the subscriptions of everyday Texans to keep churning out news. When you subscribe, you'll get access to all our stories as soon as they're published, so you can be informed, up to speed, and ready to vote at the ballot box. A subscription is $9 monthly, but you can save by purchasing an annual subscription for $90, coming out to just $7.50 per month. And new product alert, new subscribers will get a free Texas State Pride flag hat with all sorts of color options to choose from. For more details, visit the Texan.news/subscribe or click the URL in the description of this podcast. Now let's go back to our stories. Brad, we're coming to you. The governor has been quite busy this weekend, slashing bills with his veto power. I like that. How'd that all shake out?
As we discussed last week, the governor threatened to veto a bunch of bills as penance for the legislature not settling on a property tax relief plan. When the dust settled on Sunday, Abbott had vetoed 76 bills, a personal record for him, and 6 shy of the all-time record set by Rick Perry. I think that was in 2001. Many of the bills were vetoed explicitly due to the property tax impasse, saying in the veto statement that the bills killed may be reconsidered at a future special session after the tax plan is passed. Most of the vetoed bills came from the Senate, the chamber that is opposing the governor's preferred plan for tax relief. 50 of the veto statements mentioned property taxes.
Yeah, no kidding. So were there anything else mentioned in those statements?
Among the House bills vetoed, 8 specifically mentioned that they may be reconsidered after school choice is passed. We're generally, well, now that the impeachment trial is set for September, who knows how that's going to affect it, but the broad consensus was that a school choice special would come in September. That may still happen. It may not. I don't know. Each of those bills vetoed in this instance were authored by House members who voted against both of the test school choice votes in the House this session. Those were Glenn Rogers, who had 3 of his bills vetoed, Travis Clardy, Stan Lambert, and Ernest Bills.
Were any of those members endorsed by Governor Abbott in the primaries?
Rogers was. He had a competitive primary. I think Bales was as well.
Yeah, I kind of put you on the spot there, but basically there are several.
I know Rogers was.
Yeah.
Yes. And we, back in the primary, we talked about how some of Abbott's, not all, but some of Abbott's endorsements in the primary did not align with his priority of school choice. And Rogers is probably the
most notable or prominent.
He published an op-ed during that, I think shortly after getting the Abbott endorsement, that he is firmly a no on any school choice, or as he phrased it, voucher plan. And so that has not changed. And I think you may see the governor sitting out of some primaries that he previously jumped into. And, Rogers has had a tough race both the times he's won, but he's won both of them, and with the governor's support. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues come next year when we reach the primaries.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bradley. Cameron, a lot of the discussion around schools seems to deal with performance markers of students, and especially recently with the Houston ISD takeover, which we've covered extensively at the Texan. The grading system for the school district was a point of contention and reasoning for the takeover. So tell us how this new rating system works and the changes that the TEA made.
Yeah, so the Texas Education Agency, known as TEA, calls this new proposal the 2023 A through F refresh, and was developed for what they say was because of the disrupted learning during COVID-19. And so a lot of the changes were made to what they call cut points, which is a determining performance ranking, and cut scores are those performance markers that grade the scale of performance of a school district in accordance with their rating framework. So notably, the TEA's refresh plan has raised the cut rate or the cut score for an A in college, career, and military readiness, so CCMR, to 88%. Their reasoning, they said, for this was because the CCMR performance has skyrocketed, as the previous cut point for an A rating was set at just 60%, and the average now sits at 65%. So a big jump in that cut score. TEA also plans to change its methodology for rating school district populations, where previously each school district was rated as an overall population of students. Now, TEA will utilize a proportionally weighted average of ratings for each campus in the district, which means that each individual school will receive a rating, and then a weighted proportion average of those scores will be the determining rating.
What's been the response to the TEA's ratings proposal?
233 school districts actually penned a letter to TEA and Governor Greg Abbott expressing their concerns over the implementation of the new accountability rating system. Austin ISD issued its own statement where they indicated that their secondary campus and district A through F letter grades will decline by 1 to 2 letters due to these changes in the new TEA ratings plan.
Is there validity to the claims by these school districts, and why are they saying these things?
Well, according to recent data, Texas has the second largest K-12 school population and spends $9,871 per pupil for a total of over $53 billion annually. However, Texas K-12 schools rank 44th in spending and 39th in funding across the country. And in 2022, 38% of students in Texas performed at or above the National Assessment of Educational Progress in mathematics, and 30% scored at or above the NAEP, which is the proficiency level for reading.
Got it. And we can expect to know a little bit more about how this all shakes out as we've said before, the special session on school choice will be happening later on this year. So Cameron, thank you for your coverage. Brad, the first Texan entered the 2024 GOP race for president. Who jumped in, and did you expect to see this name in the news today?
Not today.
Yeah.
I was pretty sure it was going to happen eventually, but I honestly had forgotten about it. So I was surprised to see this morning that former Congressman Will Hurd announced his bid for the nomination, the GOP nomination for president in 2024. Hurd served 3 terms representing Texas's 23rd congressional district, which stretch and still stretches generally from El Paso to San Antonio, and encompassed a massive section of the U.S.-Mexico border. In his announcement video, he said, "If we nominate a lawless, selfish, failed politician like Donald Trump, who lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. We all know Joe Biden will win again, pulling no punches and continuing his broadly, anti-Trump position that he's had for a while now. He's been quite critical of the former president in the past, especially so since he left office. While he was in office, he opposed some of the former president's policies, such as construction of the southern border wall. He instead preferred a technology-focused approach to securing the border, believing the wall to be too costly and inefficient. So this is the first Republican Texan to jump in the race. Not the first Texan, that is Marianne Williamson, who is running against Joe Biden in the Democratic Party primary. So you can read more at the website. And
what's our website, Brad?
I don't know.
You're just like our website?
Yeah, that.
The Texan.news. Thank you.
Happy now?
I'm really happy. Okay. Thank you, Bradley. Matthew, coming to you. A newly passed law will give Texans greater control over their personal data collected online and was just signed by Governor Greg Abbott. What all does this new law do?
Well, that's a good question, Mackenzie. The new
I got
law
it from a really good
Bill.
Source. Really smart guy.
I know. You go straight for the hard questions. House Bill 4 by Representative Giovanni Capriglione and carried in the Senate by Senator Brian Hughes is known as the Texas Data and Privacy Security Act. And it was signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott this past Sunday. Now, the law is structured to where it will go into effect in 2 separate stages, and we'll explain more about that in just a moment. Now, the act creates a list of rights for internet users over their personal data, including knowing when it's collected, the ability to correct and delete personal data, the right to prohibit the sale of your personal data, and all kinds of protections against being discriminated against or retaliated against by companies for exercising all of the enumerated rights under this legislation. Now, we only highlighted a number of the things that the bill does. A more detailed list can be found in the article, but shifting towards the enforcement end of things, the law will be enforced through a civil fine brought by legal actions through the Texas Attorney General's office of up to $7,500 per violation. Regular violations of the new law are set to go into effect where they will be enforced July 1st of next year, while portions of the act that are structured to be opt-in type or opt-out type provisions will not become effective for enforcement until January 2025. Both Capriglione and Hughes say their bill will give Texans some of the strongest internet privacy protections offered in the nation, and hope their bill serves as a model for other states to follow. Now, for more complete details on what all new rights the legislation established and how the legislation works, check out our coverage on the Texan.news.
Boom. Thank you, Matthew. Cameron, we're going to end with this story. The Queer Art of Drag is a course being offered at Texas Christian University, TCU, which turned some heads due to the content presented in the syllabus. Tell us about what you found.
So as the course website explains, the goal of the course is to explore a lot of terms related to critical or critiquing social environments. And for our listeners interested, the focus on the word critical and critique is actually a reference to a subjective social perspective as a preferred method of understanding over objective analysis, which is normally what we would understand as a critical analysis is objective, but they're using a different definition for that term. According to what I found in the syllabus as well, the desired learning outcomes for students are the focus on social construction of gender, sex, and sexuality, along with the term intersectionality, which again is a new term that has continued to pop up in our social consciousness. And what that means is, according to critical theorists, which we just touched on that word critical, is to explain how individuals are oppressed by systems of authority and how different aspects of identity can intersect to create a hierarchy of inequality.
Wow. Well, Cameron, thanks so much for your coverage. And folks, definitely go read more at the Texas.news. There's a lot more information to be found.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to the tweetery section this week. Brad, we're going to start with you.
You've heard of the Rumble in the Jungle. I'm blanking on other massive fights.
I'm just going to stare at you for 6 seconds like you did to me earlier.
Okay,
leaving
fine.
me absolutely
hanging. That will
hanging.
not throw me off. Well, get ready for a new blockbuster clash between Titans. Clash of the Titans. Of the tech titan.
Ooh.
Yeah. Apparently, Tesla owner Elon Musk and Twitter owner, right?
Yeah.
He owns a lot. I guess it's the clash between Twitter and Facebook. That's what's happening.
Oh my god.
Elon Musk is going to have a cage fight with Mark Zuckerberg.
Whoa.
Wait, is this real?
This is serious.
This is not real.
Yes.
This is serious.
You didn't see them going.
It is so serious, by the way, that I got an email this morning with the betting odds for this clash of titans. And the opening odds show, according to Bovada, whatever that is, Elon Musk at minus 150 and Zuckerberg, the Zuck, at plus 110. So
the Zuck is an athlete, though. I don't know.
I think they're banking on Musk's size over.
He can absorb the blows. I know. I don't know if everyone has seen the yacht photos of Elon Musk. Hopefully he's gotten into better shape since then, but he has commented recently he doesn't work out. He said the most he does to work out is lift his kids up off the ground.
What were you going to say, Matt?
I'm going to place my bets on Zuckerberg because I think he'll surprise everybody with that reptilian super strength.
Well, I mean, a cage match. So what method are they fighting? Like what?
It sounds like it's a UFC fight, basically.
He said Vegas Octagon.
So like metal chairs?
No, that's
WWE.
Okay,
and that's fake.
I know it's fake, but that's what I understand. Like wrestling. Yes. Got it.
Have you seen
like jiu-jitsu?
Mark Zuckerberg doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
My husband does jiu-jitsu. And one of the things he talks a ton about is how you can be like very small and maybe not super muscular, and you can absolutely kick somebody's butt who's way bigger than you and way more muscular than you. So that's why I ask, is because if they're doing wrestling or any sort of like jiu-jitsu type anything, which it sounds like they might, then it doesn't really matter.
Well, I don't know when
the size
this is
of people,
but I assume that Elon Musk is going to start training for this.
Someone who said they would help Elon train is the infamous Cobra Tate, Andrew Tate. On Twitter said, Elon.
Is he going to be able to do that from prison?
From prison? Yeah, Lord.
From Romanian prison?
My gosh.
The way I see this as it going right now is kind of like Jet Li versus a sumo wrestler. I think that's kind of the strategy here. The sumo wrestler wants to overpower you with size, and Jet Li wants to run around and tire out the sumo and kick it a bunch of times.
How tall is Elon Musk? Because that matters too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I wonder.
Hayden, who do you got your money on?
6 feet, almost 2 inches.
Okay. Tall
and then
guy. Zuck's got to be tall.
Really?
Do people call him Zuck?
He's 5'7".
Oh, I think he just looks like lean and tall in photos. Yeah. Maybe
he's probably right now in better shape than Elon Musk. So
yeah, for
maybe
sure.
that line is not taking Zuckerberg on that betting line is not a bad bet.
Yeah, I would take. I'm betting on Zuckerberg right now.
Okay.
How did this fight come about? What motivated?
Yeah,
this?
What motivated this?
Cameron, do you know?
Well, so I saw.
Of course, Cameron knows. He's chronically online.
Well, I saw someone had posted a screenshot of Mark Zuckerberg's Instagram story that Zuckerberg had screenshotted a Twitter interaction. I guess Musk had called him out or agreed to do some sparring or something with Zuckerberg, and Zuckerberg said name the time and place, and so it's all sort of just
interesting
went off from there.
Interesting that Zuckerberg's programming allowed him to say something that's far afield.
Well, we know the advancements in AI.
That's true. He got his software updated.
He's not a droid. He's a reptilian.
He's reptilian.
Oh, okay.
He's a reptilian droid, maybe. Both.
Gosh. Well, we should watch when the date is and place some bets around this office. Put some pork chops on the line.
Hey, they did not legalize sports betting in Texas this year.
That's true.
Those are illegal bets that we were talking about placing on a public podcast. Nobody do this. Wink, wink, nod, nod.
Great. Matthew, what about you? What did you find on Twitter?
I stumbled across a news article shared by Jordan Peterson about how the carnivore diet is becoming extremely popular. And that sounds like a pretty good idea to me, so I thought it was interesting.
And the carnivore diet, if I'm not mistaken, is strictly just meat and nothing else. Correct? I think Jordan Peterson's talked about this.
There's a little bit of other stuff that's allowed, but basically it's no carbs.
Got it. Okay.
High protein.
Yeah, absolutely zero. So it's just meat.
Just meat.
Just meat.
Wow.
Yeah, I tried it for a while.
How was it?
Not fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Sure, it's pretty
did
costly
you like lose a lot of weight?
Yeah, I bet it must be pretty costly. Well, unless you're at Costco.
Yeah.
Just buy in bulk.
You know, if you're buying
reading the article, it says it has all kinds of benefits. You lose a lot of weight, and
it's water weight.
Protein's a huge deal. It balances your hormones. All sorts of good things for your body. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
This has been great. Thank you, Matthew. That sounded sarcastic. It was not. I really did appreciate that one. I think the carnivore diet is super interesting. Cameron, what about you?
Oh, so I was just looking around online like I normally do, and I saw there was a strange law that got signed in by Greg Abbott, and it's actually going to fine people if they try to pass off their pets as service animals. So I'm sure everyone has seen people bringing their pets into restaurants or on airplanes, or they're like, oh, it's my service animal, I need him with me. Well, now, if it's not an actually registered service animal, you're going to get fined for it.
Oh, so it's not cutting down on what can be registered. It's if you say it's a service animal and it's not, then you can be fined.
That's correct.
Oh. So if you register your emotional support peacock as a service animal, you will not be fined under this.
I didn't look that deep into it. I don't know if peacocks are on the list.
They're pretty dangerous, and aggressive, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there was...
Or maybe I'm thinking of ostriches. I don't know.
Are they as aggressive as orca whales?
I was about to go into the orca whale. I have so many thoughts, so many things to say. We should hurry into the orcas and the submarine. Okay. Anyways,
they're
cracking down a little bit on the fake service animal thing.
That's right.
Good to know.
As they should.
Hayden, what did you see this week?
Happy Flag Day.
Is that what you have for us today?
That's what I have. I'm sorry.
That's really nice.
Is there a song associated with Flag Day?
I already talked a lot on this pod, so I'm keeping it brief.
Well, we do have a lot of things that we need to talk about.
Have you ever watched the Big
and
Bang
by the way,
Theory,
the link.
He does the
what, Matt?
Have you ever watched the Big Bang Theory where he does the Sheldon's fun with flags?
No.
Have you ever watched Big Bang Theory without the laugh track? It's very depressing.
By the way, I really did link to a tweet. I linked to our official The Texan Flag Day tweet.
Oh, that's really nice.
Good.
It was a great graphic.
That's why I linked to it.
It was really lovely. Okay, well, I'm going to pivot us to very interesting and incredibly horrific and potentially life-threatening stuff. I'm sure a lot of you have focused some of your attention this week on the submersible that has gone missing in its quest to arrive at the Titanic wreckage 12,500 feet under the sea. Wild. We were talking about this a lot in the office this week.
That's just over half a league.
Yeah, which...
Not even close to 20,000.
No one knows.
Which honestly, we have spent less time talking about the specifics of the submersible and more time talking about what is a league and how many feet is 20,000 leagues under the sea. That's been far more of the topic of conversation around this office, which should surprise no one who knows the people who work in this building. But we've been watching, and I think like the thing that shocks me the most is I just did not realize how deep in the ocean the Titanic wreckage was. It is so unbelievably deep. Like one of the deepest points that's been explored in the ocean is where the Titanic wreck is. Like that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Interesting that you actually think the Titanic is down there.
Whoa.
And that this isn't some psyop.
We're going down a rabbit hole.
Some people think J.P. Morgan sunk the Titanic.
We just use the word psyop on this podcast. Lord in heaven.
By some people, I mean nobody.
I bet you also believe that birds are real.
I just try to have a nice little topic that we talk about together, that we've talked about extensively during the week, and then this happens.
Let's talk about the update.
There we go.
That's good. That's good.
Apparently, a robot found a debris field, and it is unclear to me from this CBS News article whether the debris field is the submersible in question. But the Coast Guard believes that while the oxygen supply was said to run out after 96 hours, that they could still be alive, and that this is still a search and rescue mission. So it's possible that there may be survivors. And if the debris field is the submersible and they find it, they could still be alive. Any comment on that? Anybody? Bueller?
I think if the submersible imploded and there is a debris field, I think the humans have no longer.
Well, okay, obviously I didn't mean that.
Oh, okay.
If the thing blew up, that they're still alive. Yeah, they're breathing underwater down there. That was my theory.
And I'm sure they have some safety equipment.
I mean, I don't know what debris field means in this context. If it means that there's just something resting on the sea, what is it called? The seafloor, seabed?
But debris isn't debris by definition like particles? Like pieces of something that used to be whole?
I mean, it could be pieces of the submersible that fell off. I don't have any idea what this...
that's true.
What...
Yeah, I was hearing some conversation that it could be that they landed the submersible. It landed on top of the Titanic itself, and because of all the corrosive nature of being underneath the ocean, it actually went into the Titanic.
That would be an ironic death.
Yeah, that would be horrible.
Or they could have got their propeller stuck by an old door.
A what?
A propeller was stuck by an old door?
Yeah, they could have got an old door.
Is that a country saying I'm not familiar with?
We aren't quite sure.
Only in West Texas.
We aren't quite sure which.
Come on. Titanic movie reference.
Oh, it's a reference?
Floating
on
the old door.
Wow. We are very dense. This has been quite the podcast. Yeah. Right over our heads, Matt. You're culturally relevant. I can't even speak. Your cultural.
There was definitely room for two people on that piece of driftwood.
Yes, there was.
Is this a sore subject for you?
Rose is the most selfish person that's ever existed.
I think I'm just still angry that I couldn't say your cultural relevance. Just sad. Oh boy.
That's okay. I couldn't say Ozark. Or was that you?
That was
also
me.
You who couldn't say...
That was also me. Oh my gosh.
I had trouble saying it too.
Okay, well that's nice. I did read that the thickness of the submersible was like 5 inches of carbon fiber, which is unreal to think about. 5 inches of carbon fiber.
I'm sorry. Can we go back to this? I still can't get over the fact that you thought that I was saying that they were under there swimming around, waiting for the rescuers to get there.
This is 12,000 feet underwater. Their bodies could not handle that.
They're down there just
swimming around,
building sandcastles at the bottom of the ocean.
Well, that's something too. Is like even if they find the submersible underneath, like all the way underwater, where the Titanic wreck is, some expert who knows these things said that it would take 8 hours for them to get the submarine back up to the surface. Like it's an 8-hour trip.
Maybe they're mermaids.
And they're
they turned into
the
mermaids.
orcas. They're getting smarter. Help them.
Yeah, we need to call in the orcas for this.
We're journalists. We can make educated inferences.
Absolutely.
If there's a debris field and they could still be alive, they're mermaids, and the orcas are helping them
There you go.
Giving them swimming lessons.
That gives me some hope for these people.
The behavioral trend of the orcas isn't to help. It's been the other way around. So maybe that's actually the orcas responsible for the missing.
Whoa! New twist.
Bringing this back to reality here. One thing I really don't understand is, and I guess the only possible explanation is this: the submarine is incapacitated. But why don't they just float up?
Okay, I was also reading about this. Thank you for asking. There are supposedly 7 ways that the submarine would float back up to the top if one failed. So like there are 7 safeguards for something happening, so that you have a 7-time chance to find a way to float back up to the top. So this expert who had gone on one of these missions before, or excursions or expeditions, whatever you want to call it, said that like he was very skeptical that the submersible was still intact, and that something was wrong, and that there was some leak or breach in the safety or external. I don't know.
Do you remember when the Columbia exploded?
Yeah.
That was just, I think, one tiny, not scale, but I'm envisioning like a scale on a fish, but like one piece of the exterior was loose, and that caused the entire thing.
I thought there was the
word
O-ring.
I was looking for.
There was like the O-rings because they decided to launch despite the cold temperature.
Am I thinking of the Challenger then, or
I don't know. You know what I'm talking about.
It takes something very minor for something very major to go wrong.
Y'all, I get claustrophobic in elevators. The thought of being in an underwater capsule that is leaking is so terrifying.
With 4 other people.
Well, and your Xbox controllers ran out of batteries.
I wonder too, in these situations, like human nature is such a dangerous thing that if you're trapped in a submarine underwater with limited oxygen supply, are you like, okay, these other people are competing with me for oxygen, and does something go wrong interpersonally with the people down there? I think that's a total possibility. Like their lives are at stake.
I actually read that if somebody were to die, that would consume more oxygen than if they were alive.
But how would they know that though?
That's true.
You know?
I mean,
there's no way for them
to
also
eject.
Supposedly a submarine expert.
Yeah. Anyways, well, we very much hope that people find, yeah, honestly, and I hope beyond all hope that they find this submersible intact and everyone alive and well. Okay, well, folks, thank you so much. Okay, oh wait, no, we don't have time. I was going to ask you a question about whether you go. Okay, no, we're going to lightning round. I'm going to say your name and you're going to answer. No explanation, which is going to be hard for all of you because you're all reporters and all you do is use words. So I'm going to make this succinct and quick. Space or underwater? If you had to go on a mission to space or an underwater excursion with Ocean Gate down to the bottom of the ocean floor, which would you do? Brad?
Space.
Cameron?
Space.
Hayden.
Space.
Matt?
Space.
Space for me as well. Okay, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you listening to us blather, especially on this podcast where we could not put 2 words together. And by we, I mean me. Thank you so much, and we will catch you next week. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you enjoy our show, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more of our stories, subscribe to The Texan at thetexan.news. Follow us on social media for the latest in Texas politics, and send any questions for our team to our mailbag by DMing us on Twitter or shooting an email to editor@thetexan.news. We are funded entirely by readers and listeners like you, so thank you again for your support. Tune in next week for another episode of our weekly roundup. God bless you, and God bless Texas.